There's a cruel sentence you never thought would apply to you. I love them, and it still wasn't enough. You grew up on stories where love changes everything. Love breaks curses. Love brings people home. Love heals the broken. Love saves. And then one day, you find yourself in a reality where love doesn't change the diagnosis, doesn't fix the addiction, doesn't erase the trauma, doesn't stop the self-destruction. A reality where you are pouring everything you have into someone, and you are still watching them slip away. At Christmas, when the world is full of miracle stories, that reality can feel unbearable. Films end with happy reconciliations. Songs talk about coming home, finding peace, healing old wounds. Lights glow in windows, families gather, and there is this global whisper in the air. Love wins. But what about when it doesn't? What about when love sits beside a hospital bed and watches numbers drop? What about when love stands in the doorway while someone chooses the bottle again? What about when love waits all night and they still don't come home? What about when love begs them to get help, to stay, to fight, and they look away? No one tells you what to do with that kind of Christmas. Psychologically, there's a brutal collision happening inside you. On one side, there is attachment, the powerful bond that wants to protect, rescue, hold, and heal. On the other, there is reality. The fact that you do not control someone else's body, mind, or choices, no matter how much you love them. In theory, you know this. In practice, your heart keeps screaming, if I just love harder, it will work. So you try. You stay awake at night thinking of the right words. You research treatments, therapists, programs, plans. You send messages, you make calls, you set reminders. You offer to go with them, to pay for things, to sit through appointments. You bend yourself into shapes you don't recognize just to reach them. And when it doesn't work, the pain doesn't just feel like sadness. It feels like failure, because somewhere deep inside, there's an old belief. If I love you enough, you won't leave. You won't use. You won't give up. You won't get worse. You won't die. So when they do, a part of you thinks, then I must not have loved you right. It's not true. It feels true. At Christmas, those thoughts get louder. You see families that seem whole. You hear stories of Christmas miracles and second chances, and they finally turn their life around. And you think, why not us? What did I do wrong? There is a hard, clinical sentence from psychology that doesn't look magical on a card, but you need to hear it. You can influence someone, but you cannot control them. You can support someone, but you cannot live for them. You can love someone, but you cannot override their illness, addiction, or choices by sheer force of feeling. Love is strong, but it is not a medical treatment. It is not a detox center. It is not a shield against accidents. It is not a replacement for their own willingness to heal or stay. This truth hurts because it collides with your deepest instincts. If you are a parent watching a child self-destruct, every cell in your body is screaming, fix it. If you are a partner watching the person you love spiral, your whole nervous system is tuned to, hold on, don't let go. If you are a friend hanging on the edge of someone's darkness, you keep telling yourself, if I stay, if I care, if I don't give up, they'll find their way back. And sometimes they do. Sometimes love is one of the reasons someone gets help. But love is never the only reason. And sometimes, even with all your love present, they still don't choose safety. The treatment fails, the illness wins, the accident happens, the despair is stronger, the disease progresses, the story doesn't end the way the Christmas film promised. So what do you do with that? First, you name the lie that is eating you alive. If I couldn't save them, I must not have loved them enough, or in the right way, or I must have missed something. Real love is not measured by the outcome. Real love is measured by presence, intention, consistency, care. You showed up, you tried, you worried, you cried, you waited, you hoped. You did what a human being can do with a human heart. Could you have done some things differently? Of course. Everyone could, in every situation, all the time. Our minds are experts at rewriting the past with the information from the future. If I had known it was that bad, I would have pushed harder. If I had known that was the last Christmas, I would have sat closer, said more, stayed longer. If I had seen those signs, I would have acted sooner. But you are living in real time, with limited information, with your own fears and exhaustion and confusion. You are not a God who sees all outcomes. You are a person doing their best in a situation that had no clean answers. When love isn't enough to save them, your guilt tries to fill the gap where power never existed. It's easier in a twisted way to believe I failed than to accept I was never in control. Because if it was your failure, then at least in theory, there was a version of you who could have succeeded. If it was never in your hands, then you must live with the fact that some things are simply beyond human control. That reality is terrifying. It's also the truth. This doesn't make your love smaller. It makes it honest. Imagine someone in your position coming to you and saying, "I love them so much. I did everything I knew how to do. I begged, I stayed, I held, I forgave. And still, they got worse. They left. They died. I couldn't save them. It must be my fault." Would you agree with them? Or would you see the cruelty of that conclusion? Why do you deserve less compassion than you would give a stranger? At Christmas, there's another layer, the pressure to create one last perfect holiday, or to keep everything together for everyone else. Maybe you tried to make this the year where everything would finally shift, the year they'd stay sober, the year they'd agree to treatment, the year the scans would finally be clear, the year they'd come home. You decorated more. You cooked, organized, smoothed over, smiled. You tried to generate enough warmth to melt whatever was freezing them from the inside. And when it didn't work, it felt like the season itself mocked you. But hear this clearly, you are not responsible for saving everyone at the table. You are responsible for loving honestly, for setting boundaries that keep you from disappearing, for telling the truth about what you can and cannot do. Sometimes love means staying. Sometimes love means stepping back so you don't get pulled under. Sometimes love means visiting the hospital every day. Sometimes love means refusing to enable one more lie. Sometimes love means holding their hand as they die. Sometimes love means remembering them as they were before the illness, instead of chasing them as they are now. In all of these, the common thread is this: love is not about controlling the outcome. It is about honoring the reality and dignity of both of you. There is a particular kind of heartbreak when you realize that your love did not fix them. It shows up when you see them look at you, hollow-eyed, from behind a pain you can't reach. It shows up when they say, "I know you care," and then keep walking toward the very thing that is destroying them. It shows up when the doctor says, "We've done all we can," and your mind screams back, "No, I haven't." But if you could speak to the deepest, wisest part of yourself, what would it say? Probably something like, "I am exhausted from trying to be a miracle. I am tired of carrying a responsibility that belongs to life, to illness, to their choices, to fate, to 1,000 factors beyond my reach. I want them to live, to heal, to fight, but I also want to stop crucifying myself for not being able to rewrite the story." That part of you isn't selfish. It's sane, and there is another truth you need to consider. Even if your love couldn't save them, it still mattered to them. It mattered that someone sat by their bed. It mattered that someone believed there was more to them than their symptoms or their mistakes. It mattered that someone saw the frightened child inside the angry addict, the brave soul inside the failing body, the human behind the diagnosis. It mattered that when they were collapsing, there was at least one person in the world whose heart broke with them. Love doesn't suddenly become meaningless because it didn't produce the outcome you desperately wanted. You are measuring it against a fantasy. The fantasy that love should always equal cure. In the real world, love often looks like this. holding someone who cannot promise you they'll change, showing up when there is no guarantee of a happy ending, sitting at Christmas dinner with a chair that is empty or a presence that is altered forever, and still choosing to remember who they were in full color, not just in the bleakness of their last chapter. You are allowed to be angry that love wasn't enough, angry at the illness, angry at the addiction, angry at the universe, at God, at bad luck, at timing, at systems that failed, at help that came too late. But try, as much as you can, to direct that anger away from yourself. You can grieve your limits without turning them into sins. On a psychological level, healing begins when you separate what belonged to you from what never did. What belonged to you? Your choices, your words, your presence or absence, your effort, your failures, your attempts, your avoidance, your courage, your fear. What never belonged to you? Their brain chemistry, their trauma history, their disease progression, their free will, the timing of accidents, the outcomes of procedures, the deep, private battle happening inside them that even they didn't fully understand. You can take responsibility for your side of the line. You do not have to carry the whole war. This Christmas, if you find yourself staring at a tree that feels wrong without them, or with them sitting there, changed in ways you hate, give yourself permission to step outside the myth for a moment. The myth that love always saves. The myth that if you were better, stronger, kinder, louder, calmer, they'd be okay. The myth that everyone else is getting the miracle you are denied because they deserve it more. Instead, try telling yourself a different, more painful, more honest story. I loved someone in a world where people get sick, where addictions distort minds, where accidents happen, where emotions overwhelm, where not everyone wins their battles. I love them as a human, not a hero. And I love them as a human, not a savior. My love did not cure them, but it was real. It gave them moments of safety, warmth, and being seen. That matters, even if the ending still breaks me. You are living what many people spend their lives trying not to think about. That love guarantees meaning, not outcomes. Meaning in the way you showed up. Meaning in the way they felt less alone. Meaning in the way you will carry them forward. Meaning in the way you will one day support someone else with a depth you would never have had if you hadn't walked through this fire. Love wasn't enough to save them, but it might be enough to keep you from collapsing into bitterness forever. Not today, maybe. Today you're allowed to hurt, to question, to rage, to cry at the sound of a carol they liked or the sight of an empty place at the table. Just know this. You are not standing here because you failed as a healer. You are standing here because you dared to love in a situation where love could not control the outcome. That is not weakness. That is courage. And if there is any quiet miracle in this season for you, it might not be the one you asked for. It might simply be this, that after everything, your heart is still capable of feeling, that you haven't shut down completely, that some small part of you still believes that love, even when it cannot save, is still worth giving. Not because it wins every battle, but because it is the only thing that makes this fragile, uncontrollable life bearable at all.